Quick! You have just a few weeks left to take advantage of Virgin Atlantic's 40% transfer bonus. You can use this deal to fly domestically for less than 6,000 points, or to find amazing business class deals with partner airlines to South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, pretty much anywhere. In today's tutorials, we're going to show you how. In case we haven't met, hello, my name is Julia. I'm the founder of GeoBreeze Travel. I personally get about $100,000 worth of travel every year for about 90% off by using points and miles, and we typically save our clients more than $30,000 in travel in the first 6 months of working with our team. If you are looking for a clear path to luxury travel as well, these videos are for you. Quick note, in between when I recorded these tutorials and when we're posting this video, Virgin Atlantic changed up some of their award charts. So some sweet spots got even sweeter, and some became more expensive. I'm going to do a deep dive into pricing changes in a couple weeks, so be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that video. But in the meantime, the process for finding award seats remains the same, so let's jump right in.
All right, we're going to start with an easy example, which is how to fly Delta Economy for way fewer points than you would expect. Most people, when they start out with points and miles, just use something like the Chase Travel Portal, where they'll click on flights and say they want to fly one way from Atlanta over to Charleston for this example. And let's say that we want to fly in December, and then they click go. And then they might filter down the flights to say, I want this particular Delta Airlines flight, which is at 10:49 p.m. on December 3rd. It's $189 in main cabin. Or if they want to use points for it, they'll cash out 15,000 points for this $189 flight, which I do not recommend doing. That's level one. Another way that some people might do this is to say, oh, I can just book it directly on delta.com, maybe move some Amex points over to Delta, one way from Atlanta over to Charleston in main cabin instead of first class. It's going to be about 17.5 thousand points. And if we want to find that exact same flight, 10:49 p.m., this is 17.5 thousand points plus $6 in taxes and fees. Maybe people start here. Maybe then they're like, oh, I can get it for a little bit cheaper through the Chase portal. But that's not what I would recommend either. Right now, Chase has a transfer bonus of 40% to Virgin Atlantic, which is huge. So what you would want to do is go to virginatlantic.com and click on Reward Flights. Then check to see if the flight that you want to book on Delta is available on Virgin Airlines' website. So for example, here would be from Atlanta over to Charleston on December 3rd. And we're just going to do one way for now. Then click search. And here we can see that same flight, 10:49 p.m., is only 7,500 points plus $5 in taxes and fees if we book through Virgin Atlantic, versus on Delta, it's 17,500 for the same flight, or with the Chase Travel Portal, it's 15,000. But it gets even better, because this is the price before any transfer bonuses. Since Chase has a 40% transfer bonus, you would actually just need to transfer over about 5,357 points to book this. Now, when you transfer Chase points over to a transfer partner like Virgin Atlantic, you do need to round up, so you would need to transfer over 6,000 points to do this. But if you're booking multiple tickets because you have multiple family members you're booking this for, then you don't have to round up for each ticket. You can just do a lump sum of 23,000 points or something like that for 4 people. So that's just a quick example of how you can save a lot of points with this transfer partner over to Virgin Atlantic to fly on Delta Economy flights. Next, we're going to cover some more advanced bookings and some business class flights that you can book for amazing prices using this deal as well.
If you love free resources that let you maximize your points, check out geobreezetravel.com/quiz. There, you will find a free short quiz that will point you to the best resources depending on whether you're trying to earn more points, redeem your points, or something else. And by taking the free quiz, you will also get access to the free Points 101 course, which is a fantastic resource for anybody just getting started with points and miles. Okay, Time to get into some of the fancy stuff. Let's say that you're not interested in Delta Economy, but instead, you want to fly in a lay-flat business class seat. Well, the Virgin Atlantic transfer bonus can help with that too.
Next up, let's talk about how to use the Virgin Atlantic 40% transfer bonus to find some really cool flights down to South America in business class. To find these flights, I go to seats.aero and then click Explore and then Virgin Atlantic Flying Club. I'm showing flights from North America over to South America. I have the Pro version, so I'm showing the full year, and I filtered this down to the airports that are in the continental United States and arriving in South America. I filtered it down to Santiago, Chile, Rio de Janeiro, Lima, Peru, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Buenos Aires, Argentina. Also, for this particular flight, I filtered it down to LATAM business class. You can also choose to include or exclude specific airlines, like if you wanted to find the Delta One flights down to South America, you could filter this down to just Delta, but right now, there's not a lot of Delta availability. All of these that I'm seeing on the business class column are Delta or LATAM, and in business class, most of what we're seeing is in LATAM for 50,000 points or Delta for 80,000 points. So let's check this one first, where it looks like you could fly from Atlanta over to Lima, Peru in business class on New Year's Eve for 50,000 points with LATAM. What we'll do is then we'll go to Virgin Atlantic, click on Reward Flights, and say that you are flying from Atlanta over to Lima. We're going to search one way at a time. If you want to do this for the return flight, it's the exact same process, just switch the airports. And then we're going to select December 31st for one person. You can also, instead of searching all cabins, filter this down to just upper class, which is going to be business and first class. Then go ahead and click search. And here we see we can fly from Atlanta over to Lima with LATAM business class for 50,000 points plus $55 in taxes and fees. Or you can fly Atlanta to Lima in Delta One for 80,000 plus $20 in taxes and fees. Delta One is a slightly nicer product than LATAM, but I recently flew LATAM business class down to South America, and it's a fantastic cabin as well. And keep in mind that there is a 40% transfer bonus if you're using your Chase points to book this with Virgin Atlantic. So if you wanted to book the LATAM option, it's 50,000 points regularly, so you would just need to round this up and transfer over 36,000 points to fly this in business class. Or if you want to go for the Delta One suite, then instead of 80,000 points, you would need to transfer over about 58,000 points in order to fly this down to South America. This flight is approximately 7 hours direct in business class, so I would say aim to spend at most 70,000 miles to fly this in business class, and with either of those two options, it does meet that threshold for the 10K rule. And that's a much better deal than if you were to try to book this with Delta directly, because if we search for Atlanta over to Lima, Peru on delta.com one way on December 31st for one passenger, then we click search. Then to fly this exact flight, which leaves at 2:15 p.m., it's 190,000 Delta points to fly this Delta One suite from Atlanta over to Lima. But if you go through Virgin Atlantic instead, it would be 80,000 points without the transfer bonus, so already about half the price, or only 58,000 points if you take advantage of the transfer bonus. So you can save so many points by doing that. For other South American destinations, it's going to be a little bit cheaper if you're going further south, and they don't have any Delta One availability, but they do have LATAM availability for 95,000 points to fly routes like Boston over to Sao Paulo, JFK over to Santiago, Chile, Miami over to Sao Paulo as well. And it looks like there's not currently availability over to Argentina, but you have a few different options where you could hop around in South America if you wanted to take advantage of this Virgin Atlantic promotion.
Remember, you can get a 40% transfer bonus when you move Chase points over to Virgin Atlantic, and that bonus goes through November 30th, 2024. If you're in the market for a new card so that you can earn these types of points, but you're not sure what card to get, Check out our free credit card consultation form at geobreezetravel.com/consultations. We will send you a personalized recommendation based on your particular goals, budget, and lifestyle. Or if you do already know what card you would like to get and you would like to support this show when you apply for your next card, check out our links at geobreezetravel.com/cards. So, what if you don't want to fly to South America, but you instead want to use this Virgin Atlantic promotion to fly to Europe? Here are some options for how to maximize your points with that.
Okay, let's say that you wanted to fly Delta One, but you wanted to fly it not to South America, but to Europe instead. The process is very similar, where you would go to seats.aero, click Explore, click Virgin Atlantic, and then search from North America over to Europe. Award space for this is very sparse, so I would make sure to get the pro version of seats.aero if you want to do this. It's only $10 per month, and then that way you can find availability through the whole year. I would also filter the airlines down to Delta so that you don't get all of the Virgin Atlantic award availability as well. And here we can see there's only 3 dates that are available to fly in Delta One suites. We have one that goes from Detroit over to France in March, on March 16. We have JFK over to Lisbon, Portugal on January 25. And we have Detroit over to Amsterdam on January 26. Each of these flights is going to cost 47,500 points per person one way in Delta One suites, which is fantastic. The downside of this, though, is that the taxes and fees over to Europe tend to be really high. Usually you can get around that by just not flying over to London, but even with these where it goes over to France or Portugal or Amsterdam, you're still looking at more than $1,000 worth of taxes and fees. So if you are kind of points poor, but you can afford higher taxes and fees, this can be a good option to look into. So once you've found some flight deals and you like one of these dates, the process is very similar, where you would just go to Virgin Atlantic, click on reward flights. Instead of all cabins, filter down to upper class. Say that you want to fly from Detroit over to Amsterdam. Let's do this example, one way on January 26th. And then if we scroll down, we see that there is this flight with Delta Airlines on Delta One for 47,500 points, plus $1,027 in taxes and fees. And then if we take into account the 40% transfer bonus from Chase, 47,500 divided by 1.4 is 33,000 and change, so we would round up and say that you would need to transfer over 34,000 points in order to book this Delta One flight, which is a great deal, even if you are still paying $1,000 in taxes and fees. Because if you were to book this through Delta directly, you're going to be looking at about 375,000 Delta miles, which is a little bit insane. Or if you just wanted to pay for the flight, for this one that departs at 2040, it's about a $3,600 flight for Delta One. So if you wanted to calculate your cents per point, I did a little bit of rounding, but let's say that this rounds up to a $3,600 flight. You're going to subtract out the taxes and fees you would still need to pay. So you'll take 3,600 minus 1,027 and take that whole quantity divided by the 34,000 points that you'd need to transfer over from Chase to Virgin Atlantic. Given all that, you're going to get about 7.6 cents per point for this redemption on Delta One from Detroit over to Amsterdam in Delta One, which is a really, really good cents per point redemption, especially if you're a beginner. If you're not hung up on the whole Delta One suites thing, on seats.aero you can just unfilter on Delta, so it'll bring in all of the other airlines as well. Like maybe you can book some Air France flights through Virgin Atlantic as well. Those taxes and fees tend to be quite a bit lower. Or same with KLM, where the taxes tend to just be $200 or $300. This one's $400 from Canada over to Amsterdam, but that's in Canadian dollars. Or of course you could book Virgin Atlantic on its own metal. The prices tend to be very similar, right around that 47,000 to 48,000 points per person, one way in business class price range. But if you are flying to London on Virgin Atlantic, do expect the high taxes and fees as well, where you're probably going to be paying more than $1,000 in taxes and fees. But there's going to be a lot of availability if you want to fly Virgin Atlantic on its own metal over to London or Scotland or Manchester or somewhere else like that.
Are you enjoying these types of tutorial videos? If yes, please let me know. Click that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for even more points and miles tips every week. Anyone interested in using this Virgin Atlantic transfer bonus to find some great deals to Africa? You can do that too. Here's how.
You can use the Virgin Atlantic promo to fly pretty much anywhere in the world. Like, let's say that instead of wanting to go to Europe, you want to go to Africa with this deal. Same process to start. Go to seats.aero, click Explore, click Virgin Atlantic, then show flights from North America over to Africa for the full year. Under Airlines, if you're a Delta fan and you want to fly this Delta One route instead, it looks like you can filter down to Delta under the different airline codeshare partners, and there's a few different dates where you can fly from JFK over to Dakar, Senegal. If we type this into Virgin Atlantic, I took the example of December 3rd from JFK over to Senegal. It's going to be 80,000 points plus $17 in taxes and fees to fly direct with Delta One. If we were to book that with Delta directly, that would be a $3,000 flight per person one way, or 265,000 miles plus $18 in taxes and fees, which is a little bit insane. These are the prices that people usually start off seeing when they're trying to figure out how to do points and miles, and they're like, I don't want to spend 250,000 points to just fly one business class, one way, one person, not realizing that you can get it for a lot cheaper. Especially with this transfer bonus, instead of transferring over 80,000 points, you would only really need to transfer over 58,000 points with the 40% transfer bonus. Is that a good deal? Well, if the regular cash price of the ticket is $3,000, $3,020 to be exact, and then you only have to pay $17 in taxes and fees, and you need to transfer over 58,000 points, you're getting about 5 cents per point there. And this is where a little bit of the decision making comes into play of, okay, would I rather take that previous flight that we were talking about from Detroit over to Amsterdam? I'm going to get 7.5 cents per point because it's much fewer points required, but it did involve $1,000 in taxes and fees. Or would you rather take this flight, which is 5 cents per point over to Senegal? If you only have $17 in taxes and fees and want a cool vacation, this might be a better option for you. But for everybody who is very, very focused on cents per point isn't the end-all be-all. Sometimes it does depend on how much is in your budget to stretch for taxes and fees and other expenses once you're on the ground, because I imagine that Amsterdam is a much more expensive destination than Senegal is. It might depend on, do you have interest in visiting either of those destinations, or are you just like, I think I'll just skip on all of these different flight deals for now. None of them really call to me, which is completely fine too. You don't need to jump on a flight deal just because there's a 40% transfer bonus. Never transfer your points speculatively. Only do this if you actually see the flight that you want to take. Because you don't want to move all your chase points over to Virgin Atlantic, not book any flights, and then suddenly next month, I'm making this up, there's a transfer bonus to Air France or to Air Canada or Singapore Air or something else, and now you're like, oh, I kind of want to jump on that one now, but I don't have any other points to transfer over. If you don't want to do Delta over to Senegal, you have some other options as well. You could fly Air France over to Nairobi, Kenya. You could fly Kenya Airways over to Nairobi as well. Either of those are going to cost 97,000 points, and that's before the transfer bonus, and it's direct from JFK over to Nairobi. And there's also some options with ITA or KLM or Virgin Atlantic as well, though those are not going to be direct and they cost a little bit more versus the options with Delta or Kenya Airways. If you're interested in visiting Africa anytime soon and you want to take advantage of this Virgin Atlantic transfer bonus, this would be how you do it.
Our last walkthrough covers how to use Virgin Atlantic to fly some amazing codeshare partners to Asia, even if you need to find business class seats for a family of 4 or more people. And if you are interested in leveling up your points and miles game and maximizing your points too, We have a couple of options for you. The first one is the GeoBreeze Travel Patreon, which you can join starting at $5 per month through patreon.com/geobreezetravel. Each month, we prepare personalized step-by-step tutorials for the routes that our members request. We also provide open forum group coaching where you can ask any questions that you have about points, miles, or credit cards in general. And sometimes we talk through some of the tips and tricks that I don't really mention on social media. And if you're looking to get even more free travel with points, and you are a business owner or individual who spends $100,000 per year on expenses or more, check out our one-on-one points portfolio management service. We typically save our clients somewhere between $30,000 and $60,000 in travel in the first 6 to 12 months of working with our team. If that sounds like something that you would be interested in, book a free intro chat with us at geobreezetravel.com/intro call to learn more. Okay, let's walk through some great ways to fly to Asia using Virgin Atlantic's program.
All right, what if you want to use the Virgin Atlantic deal to fly over to Asia instead? Same process. Go to seats.aero, click Explore, click Virgin Atlantic, show flights from North America over to Asia for the full year. There are a couple different interesting codeshare partners that we'll go over today. So one is Korean Air, which is notoriously difficult to book. This is good if you're a solo traveler because usually they will only release one business class award seat per flight. If you want to fly economy, have at it. They tend to release 9 or more seats with award space in economy with Korean Airlines, but let's focus on business class for now. On seats.aero, you're looking for this 100,000 point saver space option, and there's only 3 flights available for the entire next year. You could do Boston over to Seoul on September 10 of next year, Chicago over to Seoul on September 8th, or Chicago over to Seoul on September 3rd. Let's do this example for September 3rd, where there's only going to be 1 seat available with Virgin Atlantic. Here I went ahead and did the search, and we do see it's available for 100,000 points plus $28 in taxes and fees for this direct flight from Chicago to Incheon on Korean Air. If you were to try to book this directly with Delta, that's pretty rough. It's 405,000 points for one person, one way for this business class flight, plus the same $29 in taxes. And keep in mind, with the 40% transfer bonus from Chase, you don't need to move over 100,000 points even. You can move over about 72,000 points and then book this direct flight in business class with Korean Air from Chicago over to Incheon. If you were to book this as a cash ticket, it's very expensive. It'd be about $4,818 from Chicago over to Incheon. And so if we do all the cents per point math here, $4,818 minus the taxes and fees that you would be paying divided by the points price that you would need to transfer over, including the transfer bonus, you're looking at about 6.7 cents per point with this booking, which is great. But like I mentioned, the downside is that there's really only 1 seat available with Korean Airlines, so not the best option if you have a family that wants to do business class. If you have a family who wants to fly in business class together, another option that you can look into with Virgin Atlantic's transfer bonus is with Vietnam Airlines. And it looks like there's a lot of availability from San Francisco over to Saigon. These are all direct flights, and they have a lot of available dates. If you are booking further out, like in September or August of 2025, or even of spring of 2025, I'm seeing quite a few dates available for March, April, and May. So if you want to do one of these, then I would also recommend either filtering down on the seats to say, hey, I need at least 3 seats or I need at least 4 seats in business class, and that will pare down how many dates that you have available. Even if I filter down to just the flights that have 4 seats available, there's still quite a handful of dates to fly from San Francisco over to Saigon. So let's search for August 10, 2025, where there should be at least 4 seats for 140,000 points before the transfer bonus. So we'll go back to Virgin Atlantic's homepage, click on Reward Flights, Upper Class, from San Francisco over to SGN. We're gonna search one way, and the dates for this one that we're seeing is August 10th. And let's go ahead and try to search for 4 people. Normally, I would just search for one at a time, but let's try to Speed this up a little bit and search for 4 people right off the bat. And here we do see there's availability for all 4 people. I know this looks expensive where it's like 500,000 points, 560,000 points for business class. That's the price for all 4 people. So it is 140,000 points per person one way. And the $950 in taxes is for all 4 people. So it's a little bit under $250 per person one way in taxes. And then keep in mind also that with the transfer bonus, I'm just going to do the math for one person, but 140,000 points divided by 1.4 means you only need to transfer over 100,000 points per person. And this is a 15, almost 16-hour flight, so with the 10K rule, 100,000 points is still not bad. If you want to look at it from a cents per point redemption, then we can go to delta.com. We can search for flights from SFO over to SGN. On August 10 is the date that we are searching. If you want to try to figure out, is this a good deal? What's the cents per point on this? For something like Vietnam Airlines, I would just search on Google flights, San Francisco over to Ho Chi Minh City. On August 10, filter down to Vietnam Airlines, and it looks like this is the same flight that departs at 10:50 p.m. And it would normally be about $3,400 per person one way for this nonstop flight. That is one way. I know a lot of people are like, well, you should just find the round trip and divide by 10, or you should just take the round trip price and then divide by 2 or something like that. If that's the methodology you prefer, absolutely go for it. Then it's about $5,800. Then you can just divide that by 2 if you want to calculate cents per point that way. I tend to always fly into a different airport than I'm flying out of because whenever we're doing different trips, I like to see at least 2 different countries. So for me, it would be difficult to be like, oh, you could get this entire trip for $6,000 round trip, because usually if you're piecing together different flights, you wouldn't be able to, but it's completely up to you how you want to calculate your cents per point. If you want to say that it's a $3,400 flight per person, then you just subtract out the taxes and fees that you pay, divide by the 100,000 points that you would need after taking the transfer bonus into account. You're getting about 3 cents per point that way. So if that sounds good to you, you can go ahead and jump on this deal. Or if you're like, yeah, I'll save my points for another day, you are absolutely free to do that as well.
I hope you found these tutorials useful. There's actually one more fan favorite way that you can use Virgin Atlantic to fly to Asia for about 40,000 points with this transfer bonus. And that's by using Virgin Atlantic to book ANA business class. And if you like this video, I think you'll enjoy that video next.